ATP, what it do with your boy Clay Morrain, back at you guys with another one. Shout out to all my subscribers. If this is your first time tapping into this content, you already know. Go ahead, and I invite you to go ahead and subscribe now. Subscribe to the channel, hit your bell icons so you are getting notifications when I'm dropping content like this. David Benavidez, Anthony Yarde announced about Turkey Al-Sheikh to be happening in Riyadh season. Rumor is in November. Now, as you can imagine, we know that Devin Haney and Brian Norman Jr. supposedly a fight is being coordinated for them to happen in November as well. So let's dig in a little bit deeper into this. David Benavidez, a couple of, I would say about 6 months ago. Let's look it up. Let's look it up. You know, this is off the hip here. Didn't really organize this before I put this together, but I thought this was something I would love to address. Woke up this morning, saw this on the feed here, and said to myself, how ironic is this, right? How ironic is this decision here, and how will it age, right? Me personally, I'm excited just to see David Benavidez fight, and always have given David Benavidez the credibility of and the accolades of a dog fighter who wants to fight nothing but the best. But in the past year or so, or specifically in the past 6 to 8 months, I have questioned a little bit of Sampson Leakowitz's, I don't want to say loyalties, but priorities, right? And bear with me, sit here with me for a second as I dive into this, and maybe this will make a little bit more sense as the conversation moves on and develops. So David Benavidez fought in February of this year, 2025, brought the year in on a great note. He was coordinated in the beginning to fight against what's my guy's name? Oh my goodness. Oh my God. I'm having a brain fart here, right? Hart. Is it Jesse Hart? No. What is my guy's name, man? Goodness gracious. I believe it is Jesse Hart. Let me see here. Yes, Jesse Hart. Shout out to Jesse Hart, a Philadelphia native, great boxer. I believe he works with Greg Hackett out there in Philadelphia. Great fighter, right? But this was a fight that the fans weren't asking for. And David Benavidez seemed to take his career into his own hands. And although in the beginning he was mentioning that he wanted to fight David Morrell, the announcement was made that he was going to be fighting Jesse Hart. David Benavidez actually put out a statement retracting the fight between him and Jesse Hart, between him and David Morrell, saying, oh, it looks like it's going to be Jesse Hart, but had a change of heart, conversations with his team, sent his own team out there to reach out to David Morrell's team and make a fight between him and David Morrell as he made his way into the light heavyweight division, and he wanted to take more control over his career. The way his career went at 168 was okay, but the way it ended at 168, him not ultimately getting that fight with Canelo Alvarez, we can argue that he stayed in the division as being called the Mexican Monster, a big fighter for 168. A lot of people were looking to see what was holding him from moving forward to 175, and maybe even now with rumors of him potentially entertaining going to the cruiserweight division to fight Zurdo Ramirez, right? I digress. Let me bring it back a notch here to say that ultimately, at the end of the day, the point is David Benavidez took control of his career, made the fight happen with David Morrell. Sampson Leakowitz on the job went out there to coordinate this fight, help him coordinate this fight. And we can say that we saw David Benavidez do something that the boxing space loves to see the fighters do, which is coordinate and steer and move their own careers. Because let's be frank, honestly, a lot of the times when you don't see the fight you want to see, it's not the fighters. The fighters in general probably are all motivated to fight each other, but the politics of the sport, the promoters of the sport, all the outside interests usually influence what you see ultimately end up manifesting in the ring. That being said, seeing that fight get put together brought in the 2025 year on a February card with David Benavidez headlining against David Morrell. It is ecstatic. The boxing space ecstatic. This is what we want from boxing. We saw Errol Spence do it with Terrence Crawford, right? When fighters get involved with their own careers and get hands-on with their own careers, it turns into great things for the boxing fans. And ultimately, for boxing in general, it just ages well. On the back end of a grueling 12-round fight with David Morrell, David Benavidez has a performance that gives him a new momentum that he could build on and move in a direction to where he could actually become a face of boxing. The conversations were just like a box of chocolates, right? You just didn't know what you were going to get. David Benavidez, the face of boxing. David Benavidez, the face of the PBC. David Benavidez, must-watch boxing. David Benavidez, the new star of Las Vegas. A star was born. And we were all here for it, including yours truly. Turki Al-Sheikh saw this from a distance and said, wow, let me invite this guy out to this Dmitry Bivol Artur Beterbiev fight. No coincidence for the undisputed light heavyweight championship of the world. David Benavidez now pulling in a regular WBA title from the victory of David Morrell and also an interim WBC title from fighting Alexander Volkanovski earlier late in 2024. What was this trip going to be about? If you were from the outside looking in, how could you deny the fact that a fight between the winner of Dmitry Bivol and Artur Beterbiev would put David Benavidez in a situation that some people may say was long overdue, that he finally gets an opportunity to fight for an actual championship belt, not a bunch of interim championship belts. And I'm sure that was on David Benavidez's mind as well. But David Benavidez, in an interview, being interviewed about the results of that fight, said he favored Dmitry Bivol to walk away with that victory, that in fact, if he did win that fight, being that Artur Beterbiev facilitated and gave Dmitry Bivol an opportunity for redemption, that he would expect Dmitry Bivol to return the favor, and we'd probably see a trilogy between Dmitry Bivol and Artur Beterbiev for an undisputed light heavyweight title fight. Stay with me, guys. What ends up happening? What we see is David Benavidez comes out to Saudi Arabia. I made a video on it. He was coming out to Saudi Arabia. He seemed in an interview at Riyahd season to be excited at the opportunity to negotiate something with Turki Al-Sheikh, stating that, in fact, there may have been a fight on the table between him and Caleb Smith and that he'd gladly take that fight and he'd respect what Dmitry Bivol would, the decision he would have made to give Artur Beterbiev a rematch because, it makes sense. Something changed. Because at some point in between that interview he did in Riyadh season and the actual fight happening between Artur Beterbiev and Dmitry Bivol, David Benavidez flies out of Saudi Arabia suddenly and heads back to the States. It was interesting to say the least because he didn't even stay to watch the Dmitry Bivol Artur Beterbiev fight, rumor has it. We come to find out a week to 2 weeks later that Mauricio Suleiman decides to activate a mandatory on Dmitry Bivol on the back end of a victory, understanding that Dmitry Bivol already had acknowledged and accepted the terms and conditions to giving Artur Beterbiev a rematch. Basically put the pressure on Dmitry Bivol less than a month after he won his fight with Artur Beterbiev and put the pressure on Artur Beterbiev to get out of that negotiation with on Dmitry Bivol, I'm sorry. Put the pressure on Dmitry Bivol to get out of that fight with Artur Beterbiev, ultimately giving him an ultimatum to say, you either going to fight David Benavidez, the WBC mandatory, the WBC interim title holder, or you're going to be forced to vacate that title. Guys, to say it looked weird from the outside looking in may be an understatement, but you know me, guys. I'm going to try to keep it as professional, as unbiased, right, and as objective as possible. Whatever reason it was that fueled this decision, threw a wrench in Turki Al-Sheikh's game plan and put unneeded or threw a wrench in maybe Dmitry Bivol's game plan. Well, Turki didn't seem to be very happy with that decision, as he stated two very important tweets. The first tweet he put out in reference to his interest in David Benavidez fighting for him, he said he no longer had that interest, right? Or at least didn't have an interest in speaking on David Benavidez making any future fights at that moment. Because as time will show, has gone through, we'll see how these decisions ended up aging. Samson Leakowitz makes an interview after Dmitry Bivol vacates the title and says he's going to stick to the plan of fighting that trilogy fight with Artur Beterbiev, and that he pretty much was acknowledging he knew where his bread was buttered over there with Turki Al-Sheikh. Samson Leikowitz comes out into an interview and basically states the reasons as to why David Benavidez was not interested, and he, in my opinion, personally, was not interested in helping to facilitate a fight for David Benavidez to potentially go and challenge a Dmitry Bivol, Artur Beterbiev, or even, in this case, a Caleb Smith as well over the Riyahd season, as he threw shots at the pay-per-view numbers that Riyahd seasons Artur Beterbiev and Dmitry Bivol did. He threw shots at the fact that the crowd wasn't there like in Las Vegas, and how much that was playing the most important factor for David Benavidez's fight. He basically threw shots and stated that Riyadh season wasn't the place to be or a place to make a fight, that he wanted the fight to be in Vegas, ultimately validating or justifying his stance on trying to dictate the terms on where an opportunity like Undisputed, an opportunity for a belt, basically justifying his stance on why they felt they had to take this position. Proud of himself in that interview, as David Benavidez and him looked like they were winning, being that Dmitry Bivol vacated the title, and ultimately now David Benavidez is no longer an interim title holder. Although some people may call it an email situation, we'll just keep it objective and say he was elevated to becoming a full WBC champion. Well, from the outside looking in, it looked like Samson Leikowitz, the PBC, TGB, whatever promoters or outside entities had vested interest in David Benavidez fighting and staying over on one side of the conversation or one side of the street would benefit. I myself questioned it from the beginning, because for me, David Benavidez has always been a fighter who's been fighting and looking for glory, looking for that opportunity to fight a Canelo Alvarez, to become undisputed, to fighting legends, to staking his own claim in the game and putting his mark on an era of boxing. Never really saw him as the type of person who would freely choose to be emailed a title. I mean, maybe for the first time in his career, in the longest time, there was an actual route to Undisputed, an actual route to becoming an actual a champion and potentially fighting if Dmitry Bivol was indeed able to capitalize and beat Artur Beterbiev on the third time. Connect the dots, being that Dmitry Bivol beat Canelo Alvarez, that he may have had an opportunity to beat the man who beat the man, ultimately checking multiple boxings, killing two birds, as they say, with one stone, with this opportunity, not to mention the great paydays that I'm sure was going to be ahead of him working with Turki Al-Sheikh. It didn't make sense from the outside looking in to see David Benavidez to move that way for me personally. But hey, look, I'm not a big business in boxing expert, just sharing my perspective. Feel free to upgrade me or educate me or leave a comment there in the comment section as to the way you looked at it at the time that it developed, right? I digress. Let's get back to where we are right now. So after Samson Leikowitz confirmed that Turki Al-Sheikh had a very quote-unquote lucrative opportunity for David Benavidez to fight Caleb Smith, they proudly turned down that opportunity, took the elevated championship that Mauricio Sulaiman offered David Benavidez. And at that point, the question was, what was David Benavidez going to do now? Because as adorable as it looked that he now became this champion, and as smart as Samson Leikowitz looked for making that decision and showing that he had the control and he was a true A-side, he was a true controlling factor, you would have thought he had some leverage now. How was Samson Leikowitz going to leverage this newfound glory that they found into David Benavidez's next fight, which as a fighter would be David Benavidez's biggest priority, activity. I mean, it's just like trucking, right? We're earning as long as the wheels are turning. So as long as David Benavidez is actively fighting, what would David Benavidez really care? I mean, yeah, ultimately, I don't like the way I got the belt. And, I'd rather have fought, the winner of Dmitry Bivol or Artur Beterbiev. I would rather have done a lot of things as a boxer, and the heart of a warrior in me would rather it be that way. But hey, listen, also as a prize fighter providing for my family, if we can keep me active and I'm a champion, eventually maybe all the pieces will fall where they need to fall. How would Samson Leikowitz's take on fighting in Riyadh season age as time went on? Well, guys, if you follow the sport like I do, you saw a couple of weeks ago It came out as Eddie Hearn acknowledged it, and Samson Leakowitz, and all your major platforms and content creation spaces and news forums acknowledge that there may have been an active negotiation going on between Caleb Smith, the current interim WBO champion, light heavyweight champion, was maybe in negotiations with David Benavidez and Sampson Leakowitz, being that word is Sampson Leakowitz, the A side, the guy with all the offers, the guy holding all the cards, sent out an offer to Caleb Smith and Eddie Hearn to coordinate a fight to happen in Las Vegas, where David Benavidez was ultimately going to fight, the fight that he could have fought with Turki Al-Sheikh for that lucrative opportunity. But more importantly, would have had the fight in Las Vegas in his backyard where his fans could cheer him on. Now, David Benavidez, with this newfound A-side privilege, dictating the pace of his own career. Sampson Leakowitz looks like he had all the cards in his hands. But the fight didn't get announced. Caleb Smith and Eddie Hearn, the fight just wasn't being announced. In fact, there were other conversations out there, rumors having circulating around the space, saying that Anthony Yarde and Caleb Smith may have been also in negotiations, that Turki Al-Sheikh or Riyahd Season or Ring Magazine or whatever platform was interested in facilitating this fight had interest in doing it as well. And ultimately, there may have been a small bidding war going on between Sampson Leakowitz's team and another promoter, financier, investor, however you want to look at it, as far as getting Caleb Smith to fight where they wanted him to fight at. Another tweet comes out later, or an interview comes out where Sampson Leakowitz communicates that, listen, we're open to make that fight wherever now. So now the space where the fight's going to happen is starting to move. We're moving the goalposts a little bit here, ladies and gentlemen. Stay with me. Don't go anywhere. Stay with me. Now the fight can happen in Las Vegas. It can happen in England now. It can happen anywhere. They're just interested in making the fight happen. The location doesn't even mean anything. Well, look, I'm an objective, critical thinker. And I'm going to say to myself that in a perfect world, in an ideal situation, Sampson Leakowitz would have had this fight in Las Vegas. Entertaining this fight happening anywhere else just shows that the more willing that these guys become to concede to the terms and conditions of this contract shows you that the other side of the conversation, to me, is holding cards as well, that they're leveraging what they bring to the table, the opportunity that they know they have for David Benavidez. They're leveraging the opportunities that David Benavidez has outside of them, understanding that Sampson Leakowitz stated his claim in the game, stood on his soapbox and claimed to be the guy who should be able to dictate the terms, throwing shots at Riyahd Season and their ability to facilitate a big fight for David Benavidez. It would have looked crazy for Sampson Leakowitz to end up doubling back and working with Turki Al-Sheikh. Not only working with Turki Al-Sheikh, but ended up in Riyahd Season, a place that he discredited and stated that his fighter didn't want to fight there. Stay with me. Don't go anywhere. Let's continue to move this conversation forward. This morning, on the back end of some decent boxing this weekend on a Jake Paul card, great undercard, shout out to all the subscribers and all the supporters of this channel. To wake up this morning, I drink in my black coffee. I look on my Twitter feed. Ring Magazine pops up. Oh, to my surprise, as I'm looking here, oh, this disappeared on me. How embarrassing. Let's pull it back up, because I literally had it here on my feed since this morning. I haven't looked back at it, but you know how these feeds go. But let's look at what I saw this morning. As I woke up this morning to come see this on my Twitter this morning. To say that it threw me, I might be lying a little bit, but at the same time, I'm 50-50. Because clearly it threw me understanding Sampson Leakowitz's position, but it didn't throw me because at the end of the day, men lie, women lie, the numbers never lie. Money talks in this game of in business of boxing, this prize fighting business of boxing. And it doesn't shock me at all that on the back end of making all those promises, the most important thing was going to be facilitating and affording David Benavidez an opportunity to continue to move his career. And that David Benavidez's price yesterday wasn't today's price. The money has gone up. The price of the fight has gone up. And maybe, just maybe, if where you at can't give it to you the way you deserve to have it, you might consider going somewhere else. This morning, Samson Leakowitz has to sit back and drink some humble tea, eat some crow, as he may have had to bend the knee and accept the fact that not only does David Benavidez not hold all the cards in calling out the way these fights will manifest in the light heavyweight division, not only may he have to concede to the idea that the biggest opportunities can't happen in Vegas for him because he doesn't hold that leverage, but indeed, you may have to go to Saudi Arabia and perform for the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia in a stadium, packed or not packed, doing press conferences, maybe even now on an undercard of a Devin Haney versus a Brian Norman Jr. We don't know. Turki Al-Sheikh is free to go ahead and give David Benavidez the respect he may have just due earned to be the headliner of that card. But worst case scenario, being at the press conferences with Samson Leakowitz and David Benavidez thanking his excellency, Turki Al-Sheikh. How does that decision age now? Looking back at it, would David Benavidez have been better off accepting the terms and conditions that Turki Al-Sheikh had offered him in fighting Caleb Smith on the rematch with Dmitry Bivol and Artur Beterbiev, the trilogy, and putting him in position to getting the winner of that fight? I don't know. Right now, we are where we are. There's a good chance that on the back end of a victory against Anthony Yarde, that naturally the winner between Artur Beterbiev and Dmitry Bivol will fight David Benavidez. I think the argument starts to get lower and lower and lower, though, as far as where that fight would have to happen. You guys let me know what you think in the comment section, because indeed, it is what it is at this point. David Benavidez will be fighting Anthony Yarde on a Riyadh card, and indeed, not be going to cruiserweight to fight Zurdo Ramirez anytime soon. Is he still looking? If he is still looking to become an undisputed champion, then this next fight, there might be a little humble pie there where David may have to concede to the fact that he may have to go ahead and fight to the terms and conditions of Turki Al-Sheikh and Dmitry Bivol. But how does the decision age? You guys let me know. As the news comes out, I'm going to give it to you guys. Catch me on the live today. We'll dive a little bit deeper. I'll be on at 11 a.m. See you guys there. It's your boy Rain. Until the next plug, it's that ATP Combat Media Show. And at this point, we out.